Cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, James Science.
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of From the Dust podcast. I'm your host, James Science. Whatever you are, whatever you're doing, hope you're highly favored and highly blessed. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit me up at From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told. Voices need to be heard. Well, today, I got a guest for you. She's got a unique story and a story that I read that I like, and she gladly accepted my invitation. So we're going to go ahead and introduce. She's an author, so let's get that out there. Fatima Oliver, how are you?
Yes. Hi, I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here, James. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Excited to have you. I know you got quite the background and quite the story to share from what I read and heard. And I want to thank you for coming on and taking the time. I know we're trying to figure out how we're going to do this, and our times were a little bit different, but we made it work, and here we are.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm a 3-hour difference away from you, but that's okay. It was important to have the
Right.
conversation. And again, I'm just so grateful for the fact.
So I explained, you were able to hear some of the content and how it goes around here. So let's get into how you grew up and where you grew up.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I'm a UNLV fan for life, Tarkanian days. What up? Um, and I grew up actually the only girl out of really 5 boys. It was three on my mom's side and then two additional on my dad's side. So it definitely was, there was no princess. It wasn't like that. I grew up in the hood, not what you see on TV as far as like the strip or anything like that. That was not my scene. I grew up just right in the middle of everything. And my mom was a single parent, so it was kind of tough being able to raise all of us by herself, no assistance, and a lot of times, just like many other people, we were at home and waiting on her to get there, and most of the time we were by ourselves and stay in the house, get in the house before she came home, make sure you clean up, or she'll wake you up to clean when she got home at 10, 11 o'clock at night. Surviving off of beans and rice, and I mean, we made it. It was kind of tough being the only girl, just because you don't really get that emotional support, I guess you would say, as a girl. Didn't really think that that was important until growing up, but in my home, unfortunately, because it was basically boys, and my mom was a single parent, and if you live that, you got to be stern, especially with boys. So I basically got the same discipline they got. And so, there was no room for crying. There was no room for feeling sorry for yourself. You got your butt up and you moved on, and you toughed it out. And I'm thankful for that. But I also believe in some way it's a blessing and a cursing. And again, that was one of those things that I learned as an adult, make it being difficult to express my emotions, being okay with expressing my emotions, because by all accounts, growing up, it wasn't anything that we did, and that's a little tough. But I do think that overall, my mom, she did the best that she could. That she came from brokenness, and so some of that brokenness impacted us in our home. Um, it was, I would say that we had some good moments, but over time, because of the strain of having to take care of 4 children with no help, meaning, no type of financial assistance from any of the fathers. I think it became trying on my mom, and so that joy kind of dwindled from our home, and so it just became tougher and tougher as far as like, I'm a definite believer in spare the rod, spoil the child, but I think back in those days, and just having experience as being a single mom, sometimes use discipline from anger or in a frustrated place because you live frustrated. And I believe that she definitely lived a life of frustration. And so if we did anything, anything that kids typically do, the crazy stuff that kids typically do, teasing, picking, lying, sometimes stealing, just the basic, you know, uh, things that happen in childhood. It was just, like beatings, and it was one of those things that you try to not do with your kids or discipline your kids when you're angry. Unfortunately, I think my mom was angry a lot, so we had some experiences like that. I had experiences like that. I was the second to the oldest, and so me and my older brother were. Um, I don't think he wanted a sister because I definitely had moments where when my mom left the house, I would actually be treated as the maid, and so as a young girl, I was that was my exposure, I guess, to men or a male. They were my first exposure, and it was the game of me being a maid, so me doing all his chores, and if I didn't comply, then he would have himself or my brothers. They would jump me and beat me up, and it was none of those things that I would tell my mom because it's just in my head I thought that's just what kids do. Um, but it's sad to say that my first interaction with any type of abuse or a hand being raised to me as far as a male was from my brothers, and they didn't know any better. That's what they saw imitated from my mom's boyfriends or their spouses. But unfortunately, it was them that was hitting me when I wouldn't comply to what they wanted.
How wow. My parents, we had four boys and one girl, but we never got that to an extent.
Yeah.
We knew that maybe my older brother, my older sister got into a lot, but all that physical or the abuse and stuff. And how did that affect you growing up?
So from my brothers, I really think that that's where my anxiety started to grow. Of course, as a kid, you don't know how to express that. Like you don't know how to articulate that, but the feeling of when my mom leave, what's going to happen? That anxiety that rises up in you. I believe that's where I began to struggle with anxiety and depression. Um, and so that coupled with eventually, brother and sister, eventually I grew up. I learned how to be tough. I can tell you that. I learned how to hit back.
Yeah.
And then after so long, my younger brother was calling me outside trying to get me to beat up the boys. So I learned to be a tomboy. Um, I, I really look at that as that was just our childhood, right? That's what we learned, and it was learned behavior. However, I also grew up in a home where my stepfather was abusive and he drank like crazy. And when he did, he abused my mom and he abused me and my older brother. And when I say the heaviness of the abuse, there was tying us up to chairs and for hours and whooping me and my brother or beating me and my brother and the belt hit wherever it hit. And then just being exposed to that, to see your parent, your mom get dragged around the house and stuff like that, it definitely brings kind of like a fear and in the home of trying to please so that he doesn't get mad enough for it to erupt like that in your home on a day-to-day basis. I think that helped me to grow to become codependent, meaning trying to solve everybody's problem, trying to diffuse it so that they were happy. Didn't matter if I was happy, but as long as they were happy, then whatever I was afraid of wouldn't happen. And so just as a kid, and when I say kid, I mean like 8 years old, 5 years old. Those are the habits I was learning. I was learning that abuse was okay, and I was learning to try to please, to diffuse, try to diffuse situations, and just honestly, the type of behavior that you see in abusive relationships now, you know, and that's what I was learning at that age. So it was a regular that was the culture. That's just how it was. You don't realize that you don't realize what you survive until you get out of it and you get in a healthy space, and then you're like, oh my God, I went through that. So that was just our life.
Wow. Now, what was? 'Cause I read and again when I read it, I think he
Yeah,
goes a little deeper than that.
yeah, yeah,
What
absolutely.
are you comfortable sharing? Are you comfortable sharing any of those details?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what I'm here for, to talk about healing. So, in regards to that was my first stepfather. My second stepfather, eventually my mom, they broke up. It just didn't work out. And so, my second stepfather, we lived in, like I said, in the hood, in the ghetto, if you want to call it that, gang infested, type of atmosphere. And so when my mom met my second stepfather, he was in the military, and it was like, shoot, the Jeffersons. We was moving on up. We was moving on up to the east side, and so we were so excited to be able to move out of that environment, And it's like we get to live in a space in a type part of town that we were never accustomed to, and getting treated to shoot a lot of food and not having to go stand in the food bank line, but actually can go to the commissary and shop and all of that. So there seemed to be some perks, but he wound up being what do you call, a predator, and he molested me at 11 years old. And so my mom at the time, she had decided to go back to school, and so she was trying to just further herself. And but when she would leave the house, he would come into my room. And so that lasted for, I would say, at least about a year, that he would travel into my room. And I believe me and my brother shared a room, me and my older brother, but they slept as hard as rocks, so nobody ever heard him entering into my room. And I could always just, it just became like anxiety times 100, because you're just wondering what's going to happen when my mom leave. I guess similar to how I felt with my brothers, but just in a kind of a different way. In this case, it was sexual abuse. What's going to happen when my mom leave? And he would come into my room pretty regular, and then the days after, he would buy me a gift, or buy my brothers a gift, but then buy me something special. And so me, I didn't understand I didn't feel that it was right as a 11-year-old, 10, 11-year-old, but I didn't understand that he was basically a perpetrator and reeling me in with the gifts. So eventually it became too much for me to bear as a child, and I just felt that it was wrong and I had to speak up. And so I eventually told my mom. Um, I don't think you probably put all that in my little bio, but um, unfortunately, me telling my mom, she definitely responded, and he wound up doing some time, and he wound up losing, um, being expelled from the military. And we wound up going back where we came from. And I'm sure that was a very kind of humiliating encounter for my mom, for our family as a whole. We're thinking that we're growing and we're making way, and then we find out that we're going into a most evil space. You know. So he did some years. He did a year and a half, and then unfortunately he was allowed to come back and stay with us. Yeah, so he came back and stayed in my home two times actually, before the age of 18 for me,
You
and that was
should have lost
uh,
more than that. But
absolutely, absolutely,
have him do time in California. I want that in one piece for sure.
absolutely. I agree. It was very difficult. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why he was allowed to come back and live in our home. I didn't understand why my mom allowed that to happen. It was a very confusing time for me to have to try to live in a home with a man that violated me in the worst way possible. And like, how do you cope? and just trying to figure out coping skills to live basically with your predator.
How did you cope with that?
Um,
Or,
I internalized. What were you saying?
or how did you cope, or did you at all cope with it?
Um, I mean, again, I think I did the best that I could do as a child when you're in that atmosphere and you're not asked, is this okay? Is this not okay? But you know it's not okay. But you're not asked those questions. It's just this is what it is. And so in that, it wasn't a matter of how I was feeling really. It was about this is a situation and you comply. So when I didn't speak, I was chastised for being rude. And when I did speak and maybe laugh at his joke, because again, I'm a child, laugh at something he said was funny, then I was accused of flirting. So it was a very, outside looking in. Now that I'm in a different space in my life. At that time, I didn't understand that was way crazy. I just felt confused as a child, and so for me, I internalized a lot. I think I really think that's when I developed really just talking to myself, keeping my feelings inside. Um, you would be amazed to think that I was so quiet. I was so timid. I just went along with anything. I just learned to go along. So that behavior, as far as learning to go along with the program, really carried me through most of my I would say at least through halfway through my first marriage. Me just learning to go along. So going along throughout my life and my family with my mom and her decisions, and then carrying that on into my dating and everything, whether I like the situation or not. I just learned to internalize, keep it to myself, and go along for the sake of.
Now was everything you went through, the drama, well, not the drama, the trauma, was that all experience as a child? Did you experiencing
Yeah.
as you were growing up, or did it all change as you grew to be an adult?
It definitely didn't change because again, it's learned behavior, and so like I stated with the abuse and learning how to um, diffuse situations. I carried that into my adulthood. Being quiet and timid, I carried that into my adulthood. Even the abuse. I was 17, 18. I actually moved out of my mom's home into a home with my boyfriend, which wasn't even any better. But I moved out to try to get away from that situation. And so that was like a motivator, besides me thinking I was so in love and he was going to save me. Moving out, I moved out so that I could avoid having to live with the guy that victimized me for a third time. Because again, at 18, he was allowed to come back and stay with us. And it was one of those things where my mom just thought, I guess they had a conversation. They're going to try to work it out. I don't really, I can't comprehend that as a parent now. I can't, that doesn't reason with me. But either way, that was their mindset, and it wasn't about if this is right. If this is good for me. You know, so I just learned how to cope and accept it. And so, unfortunately, those type of behaviors took me into a relationship with an abusive man eventually.
How did that affect the relationship with your mom, if I can ask?
Um, it's uh, it was for a long time. Shoot, I would say really up until I'll be 46 in January. And up until 44, we hadn't even talked about it. We hadn't even had another conversation about the molestation, the decision making behind it. It had come up at different times as far as her referencing certain parts of that, meaning the good part as far as she pressed charges and he went to jail. That had been referenced a couple of times in my life, not by me but by her. But honestly, it never even bothered me. It's like I was living in a space where I was so detached from that part of my life. And I think it was a way to survive. Somewhere in my youth, I made a decision to decompartmentalize that as a survival skill, I guess, because I truly did not even think about that part of my life until I got into this place where I felt like my life was falling apart and I couldn't understand why. And I had gotten to a place where I had to be on medicine for anxiety and depression and continuing to have bouts of depression where it's like I would just disappear from friends and family for like weeks and would really be contemplating taking my life and then pray, asking God for some type of help to help me get out of this dark place. And then He would help me get out of the dark place. And then I would get back on my medicine on a regular basis. And then I would move on it with my life. And that happened at least maybe 3 times a year. That was my life. About 3 times a year, I would go through this depressed, dark space where nobody could help me get out of it. I would still operate. People would think I was okay. I would deflect and help everybody else because that's what I was used to, caring for everybody else. On the inside, I feel like running through intersection and then praying, asking God to help me. He helped me get out of it. And then I said, Fatima, did you take your medicine? You need to make sure you're complying on that. And everything is going to work out. And maybe if I get this new job or this whatever, it'll be better. And I did that for years. I got on medicine for anxiety and depression in my 30s, like 30, I don't know. I've been on it for about maybe 12 years. And so, but I never got to a place where I wanted to say, why do I feel this way? I didn't get to there until I was 44. That was just a couple years ago, a year ago, well, a year and a half. So when I got to that place of where I truly felt that I was having a nervous breakdown. I had relocated for a job. I had got offer I could not resist. The money was right at that place where I had said, one day I'll make this type of money. And if I make this type of money, I'll be able to do so many things. Well, God had gave it to me and I got the job and I got the money and I was able to take care of my kids like I wanted to and just be that person that I always had this checklist of my life will be better, right? So I checked all those boxes and my life wasn't better. And then I start figure out like, well, what the heck is wrong? And I truly went through a time where on a new job, making seemingly perfect on paper, where I was crying at work thinking, oh my God, these people gonna think I'm crazy because they don't know me and I'm crying at work. Why can't I get it together? And pulling over after work because I don't want to go home a hot mess. Pulling over on the side of the street in a parking lot and just crying. And I don't even know why I'm crying. And it was so crazy to me that I had no choice but to say, God, please help me. I feel like I'm losing my mind. What is going on with me? I'm taking my medicine. What's wrong? And it forced me. I feel like God allowed that to happen to force my hard-headed self to go and talk to somebody. And I humbled myself because truly I felt like I didn't have a choice. And I humbled myself and I made me an appointment and I went and sat on the couch and I told the person, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I don't understand, but I can't stop crying. I'm on medicine and it's not working for me anymore. And that's when God was able to start bringing up all that stuff that I had stuffed down to just get through life. And and in the beginning, it wasn't. In the beginning, I was like, look, I don't want to hear what you got to say. We're not about to talk about my childhood. We're not about to talk to the pillow and hit the couch. We're not doing none of that. I just want you to tell me how to stop having anxiety attacks. That's it. Give me the coping skills and thank you. And my insurance will pay you. And but when I was the first time and I actually sought out somebody who was Christian based and I just felt God's presence in the room when we talked and I felt a vulnerability that I had never really felt before. Not from my husband, not from my kids, not from my best friend. It was a safe place to fall. And I was in that space for the first time in my life. And it just started coming out. And I really feel like that was the beginning of God being able to deal with all that stuff.
Wow, that's a. I always, I always tell people, it's okay to seek. It's okay to talk to somebody. Of course, we rely on God. to get us through situations, our prayer life or seeking Him. But I believe God puts the right people with the right words, with the right education, with the right skills
Absolutely.
to help us also to get through, the situations. Because God's God, and God can do anything, But
Absolutely.
also, it's good to relate to somebody. It's good to express your words and your faith in God. How did that help you to get through? Also, with the help of the men, how did that help you?
Yeah.
Just the rut and the depression, the anxiety. How did that help
Yeah.
you? And just take a step forward and get through all that.
It really was. I knew that my source has always been God. So no matter what I've gone through in my life, I've since I from the beginning that I came to God, I just really, really believed in what I believed in. So I don't really feel like he ever stopped really being a part of my walk. It's just I didn't know what part he was playing in the walk. But I never stopped praying. And I like to say that I feel like my his my hurt and his healing collided. So I even though I felt on my end, like say I'm way on the other side of the mall or something, I can't see him approaching me from the other side of the mall, right? I'm feeling lost, but he can see me and I'm feeling so lost. And I'm just praying and I'm like, God, can you help me? And I don't hear no audible voice. I don't hear that. But I feel like he gave me, like you're saying, like common sense, or he gave me wisdom, or he gave the Holy Spirit to say, you have this plan with your insurance. You can go see a therapist. I mean, at least for 5 free sessions, you know? Um, been kind of nuggets in my lap, and then it's my choice on what I'm going to do with it. So he directed my path. It was just, I had to make the decision to notice it and say, okay, I'm going to do that. And so even though I didn't physically see his presence or physically feel him nudging, like directing, steering my shoulders like you do a child, um, I do believe that the different things like the my insurance being able to give me the options, or my job giving me the option to be able to go and see a therapist, being able to find a Christian therapist to make me feel comfortable enough, because in my speech I'm going to talk about God and I don't want to insult them, I don't want to offend them, and I don't want to not be able to be myself. Just those little things that would help me feel comfort. Another thing is that I don't know if you know who is it, Chameleonaire, the God? Is that his name? Um, he had the Breakfast Club. He has a yeah,
Yeah.
him. I'm probably messing up his name.
Millionaire or something like that, but I know you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he started going to therapy, and I set up my therapy appointment. My first appointment I set up, and on the day I said I'm not going. I'm going to cancel. And I was going by a TV, and I happened to look at the TV, and he was on either Dr. Oz or Dr. Phil, something like that. And he was talking about how he had started going to therapy, and that and all the things he didn't know he had problems until he went. He thought he was good with his dad, and he realized he had some issues about his dad, and just how therapy had helped him. It's just God's timing. I didn't see God's hand. I didn't talk. I mean, God didn't speak back to me in an audible voice, but He led me in directions to see confirmations that this is a step I needed to take. And so, again, it's just a matter of being able to focus so that when He gives you those hints, you know that that's for you. And so when I saw Chameleonaire, I think that's his name. I want to say that's his name. when I
Yeah.
when I saw him on the TV talking about therapy, and I had literally had just said, I'm about to call and cancel my therapy appointment. That gave me that extra nudge to go. And so it's stuff like
Yeah.
that. But back to what you were asking about my relationship with my mom, I don't want to not answer that question. When I got to a place where I was in therapy for a couple of times, that those things started revealing itself. It didn't reveal itself with the therapist. I had never talked to the therapist about it. We had never gotten to that place yet, but God was doing something in me and starting to show me those things that was causing me anxiety, because I wasn't just leaning on the therapist. I was leaning on God and saying, God, help me. And in my regular prayer, he started showing me or bringing back memories that I didn't realize was there. And one day I was on the phone with my mom and she brought it up like she has plenty of times in the 34 years that this happened. Every once in a while, she would bring up and reference it. And on one occasion, she referenced it on one of our calls. And for the first time in 34 years, I didn't like it. And I got mad about it. And I didn't say anything, but I got mad. And it bothered me. And it bothered me so bad that I cried over it. And it starts to now it's stirring in that space that I had never even knew was there. And it bothered me so bad that I had to eventually talk to her about it. And that was the scariest thing. I thought I mean, I had never talked about this for 34 years. I was 11 years old the last time I brought it up. And even approaching her to discuss it, I felt like the 11-year-old child all over again. And I was shaking and I was nervous. I was sitting in my car and she was like, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" And it was like I was stuttering. I got kids, I got responsibilities, I'm intelligent. I articulate all the time, but when in this moment, I couldn't even get my words together. And when I had the conversation with her and just asking her key things like, why did you make that decision to allow him to come back and live with us, twice? Did you understand how that would impact me? And I explained how that to me damaged a part of my life and has shadowed my life and caused me some of the anxiety that I carry. And I was very grateful to be able to have the courage to say that because my mama's an old school tough mama. That you just didn't question, you didn't question. And I think to a degree, she's from a generation looked at as the silent generation, where there are certain things you don't talk about and these type of things, sexual abuse, um, uncles touching nieces, patting them on the butt or having them sit on the lap or just doing inappropriate things we don't talk about. We know that's the uncle or we know that's the grandfather or whomever, the relative that you don't allow your daughter around or even your son around alone, but you don't talk about it. It's taboo. And so it definitely put me on the bad girl list afterwards. It definitely put me in a place as far as the family that I brought up a taboo conversation. And and sometimes that's the cost of your freedom, right? And so, but I will say that after I got done with that conversation, that was the freest I have felt in my life. For the first time in my life, I felt like I stood up for myself. And I actually went into my bathroom and cried and cried. And the only thing I kept thinking and saying was, I felt like I was crying for the 11-year-old girl. And I just kept apologizing and saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry nobody protected you. But going forward, I will protect you. And that's what I got from that entire experience.
Wow. Going through all that, experiencing everything. If I can ask, were you able to forgive your abuser?
I'm not there yet. Actually, I've never even approached that. I think I'm still working through the process. Me, even we mentioned that I'm an author. I wrote a book. In my book, I discuss it, and I think it's similar, probably a little bit more descriptive in the conversations and everything that was playing in my mind at that time. But it's still fresh for me. These are conversations that I just started to have, and I honestly feel like that I'm discovering that whole part of me that I just never dealt with. So I never even dealt with, do I want to forgive him? Do I not want to forgive him? I never dealt with being even angry at my mama for making that decision. To me, she betrayed me as a child. But I never dealt with any of that because for so long it was tucked away somewhere so deep, deep, deep down inside me that I didn't even feel angry or happy, anything. I didn't feel anything.
But yeah, sometimes things take time. Sometimes I'm bitter at people.
Yeah.
And it takes me a while to get over some of the things I went through. There's some stuff people in my life that I'm angry at right now. It's not good,
Yeah.
but it is what it is in time. you know, eventually, for me, I'm sure it'll pass. But what are some of the things, everything you went through? What do you do now? Like you say, you wrote a book. We could talk about that. But
Yeah,
what do you do to help, you know, the people that are going through it or have been through
yeah.
it? How do you help them?
This is definitely one of those huge steps in me being able to help someone. So first, I'll say though, I just didn't go to therapy. It was accumulation. It was an accumulation of things that happened for me, and I just had to have the courage to walk through the foreign doors. So one was praying and asking God to reveal it, and not being afraid to um, confront what He showed me. Sometimes He'll start showing us something about ourselves, and we don't like it, so we just ignore it. But so I prayed and asked God, show me where this is coming from and give me the courage to deal with it, right? And then I was also saying, I need help. So he gave me a path to help. He gave me counseling. But then outside of that, I started going to a healing Bible study group at my church. And the Bible study group was actually a Celebrate Recovery program. And Celebrate Recovery, I'm not sure if you know about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I
I went,
some guests. She was on. If you look back at it,
yeah.
her husband ran that and became pastors, living a life of drugs and abuse. So yeah, I know
Yeah.
very much about that.
Yes. So
That's awesome.
when I started going, I was like, this ain't for me. I'm not that bad. That's what I was thinking. However, the wonderful thing about Celebrate Recovery is it's about any type of hang up. It's about any type of thing, whether it's some people are dealing with they're dealing with grief. I know somebody in the program who's dealing with the aftermath of a really bad divorce. Somebody is dealing with codependency. When I went for, again, it was a Bible study group that was offered at my church, but it wound up being um, uh, a step by step program um, for Celebrate Recovery, and it's like 4 books that we go through, and it takes about a 9 month period to get through the class, and you have to dedicate yourself to go and do the work. And so the point is that I did that too. So those accumulated all those 3 things, none of it was new. I mean, all of it was new to me. Asking God to show me myself and actually facing it was very new. Never really done that before. Going to therapy was new, and this was new. But I wanted change that bad, and so I had to put in the work. And the aftermath of me doing that is I'm still a work in progress. I still have plenty of things to heal from, but at the end, you write a testimony. Once you get to Celebrate Recovery, they encourage you to write a testimony so that you can see what you were like before you came, and then how far you've come going through the program, and even talking about your rock bottoms. And so I wrote a testimony, and when I looked at the testimony, I said, "Well, shoot, that's a book." And my book came from there. But that was the foundation of my book. And so for me, how I help people is that was one of the extensions of me trying to help people. But in saying that, I really think we all have a personal responsibility to help ourselves. I have learned going through Celebrate Recovery that it's as bad as you want to, and nobody's going to coddle you. Nobody's going to. They'll support you, but if you decide you don't want to keep coming, you just don't keep coming. Maybe you're just not ready yet, right? Because there's a certain type of dedication that comes with wanting to be healed. When you really say that you're tired of something, you got to put in that same grind of getting healed that you put in to get the party on or to get high or get whatever. You got to put that grind in. And it is not easy. It is facing a lot of not just what people did to you, but also recognizing the parts you may have played in it, recognizing the how it made you feel, recognizing the damage, meaning um, like I was saying, I went through abuse. So then I have a codependent nature where I want to make everybody feel better, and I like to diffuse a situation. So then I carry it through my whole life. And now when I get into a situation, instead of saying no, I don't agree, I'll be passive and say, no, I'll do it because I don't want the confrontation. And so that's damage. So being able to scrutinize and find where the damage is at, and then making a decision that going forward, when this happens again, what could I do differently? All those steps are steps to healing. And you have to be willing to put in that time to do those steps. And that's what I learned in Celebrate Recovery. And that's what I try to offer to whomever talks to me, whether it's, at the grocery store, or girlfriend on the phone, or in my work that came out to be a book, whatever it is, that's what I try to put out there. These were my steps. This was my story. But at some point, I had to say, this happened to me, but now it's my responsibility to not allow that to control my life. So what can I do differently? And baby steps count too. So it's not like a leap thing. It's baby steps, but you got to do it. And I think that's the biggest thing that I can share with anybody is that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. You're doing a disservice to yourself. You're doing a disservice to who God created you to be, to stay in that spot.
Wow, those are some good words. Now, the name of your book, talk about that. That way,
Yeah,
watching, they're hearing this, you can go ahead and check it out.
yeah. So it's called "The Prescription Is in the Dirt," and
Mm,
um, yeah, I was actually watching a sermon one day, and it just came to me. Actually, somebody threw it out. I don't know if you know who Taryn Wells is.
yes.
Yeah, he came to. I used to go to a church called Elevation, and he was speaking at Elevation. His first time speaking at Elevation, and that wasn't his sermon, but he threw it out there, and I was right in the middle of writing my book, and I didn't know what I was going to name it. And he was talking about something, and he said, because the prescription is in the dirt, and he said, I don't know who that's for, but whoever that's for, you take it and you run with it. I don't know who that's for. And I was like, that's mine. That was for me.
Yeah.
That was it. And I just knew it. And the reason why that hit me so hard is because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about all that stuff, not that pretty stuff, right? You know how you see on TV and they be having that pretty cry? We talking about the ugly cry. We talking about snotty nose.
Not near. Yeah, yeah.
Right. We talking about the type of stuff that make you have that, right? We're
Right,
talking
right.
about we're talking about those situations where deep, deep, deep down inside you feel like I would kill that person if you gave me a knife right now. I would cut them because they hurt
Ooh.
me so bad.
Yeah.
That stuff, right? So it's those things that stop us from being able to be available, truly available for God. What I in my journaling one day, God gave to me, a doctor can't work on half of a patient. He can't work on half of a patient. When
Yeah.
he gets ready to do surgery, they don't bring half of your body in. They bring the whole person into the surgery room. And in that same way, God needs the entire us to be able to do his full work through us, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes we're not capable of giving him all of us. If some of us, even if it's 10%, is stuck on how somebody hurt us so horribly, and we're afraid to face it. And so the book talks about my personal experiences, because I'm not trying to chastise anybody or be on no soapbox and really telling people you do this. I think everybody walk is different. And I have my own stuff that I'm still working through. And honestly, this book was an extension of therapy for me, to be able to feel free enough to talk about all this stuff that I'd never really talked about before. And in talking about that, it gives me freedom. But in the book, that's what I talk about, all that dirt, all that grimy stuff that I would maybe never tell somebody I did before, but it's coming out, and talking about how God helped me heal, the different perspectives He gave me through those different situations. I talk about my ex-husband, and being in a physical abusive relationship. I was married 9 years, got married the day after my 21st birthday, and just the abusive relationship, and and talk about my father and the relationship that I did not have with my father for much of my life. And honestly, through the healing process with the help of therapy, God and celebrate recovery. This year in July, for the first time, he was able to meet his grandchildren for the first time.
Wow.
And that was huge. I never in my life thought that I would have that moment. As a matter of fact, when I was in my first Bible study, they had us write down something you believe is impossible for God to do. And that was like number one. And number two was for me to feel blissful in my life because I was so depressed and down. And I never felt blissfulness. I never felt exuberance from the inside out. I didn't know what that was like. So those are the two things I wrote down, and God made a way through the steps that I had to take in my healing. Um, Having tough conversations with people that have hurt me, if it was safe to do so, making the appointment to sit down and not attack, but have a healing conversation. This is what this did to me. And if they were open to it, then maybe healing can start. And that's what I did with him for the first time in 45 years. And it was at that moment where he was ready to hear it and open to hearing whatever it is I said, even if it was hard to hear. And it ended in such a awesome way that he wound up coming to where I live now and meeting his children, grandchildren. And now they call him grandpa. I'm still trying to get used to saying dad because I'm not used to saying that. That sounds strange for me, but I'm still learning that. But just working through all that dirt and grime, there is healing. And so even on the picture, the cover of the book, it'll show the dirt and the soil at the bottom, and then you see the plant rising up because that's where all the work is at. It's at the bottom. You can't see it, but you got to get down there and turn that soil, right? And then that's how it grows. That's how the plants grow. And that's what we are for God.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking about it, and as I think, a lot of people want God just to do things automatically, but like you say, we can't give half ourselves to God. Like I mentioned, whatever prayers we have, God, if it's looking for a job, grant me a job. You can't sit in your butt and
Right.
expect God. You got to go out there and help God, help yourself, like you said, and
Absolutely.
we pray to God and He speaks, and then we listen and we take those steps. That's when He moves, and that's when
Yeah,
our lives can complete.
yeah.
And what a story, it was more than I expected, and taking it in, God, and your fight and your willingness to listen and go walk through those doors that God provided is the reason why you made it through and what you're
Yeah,
doing today. Wow.
yeah, absolutely. It was nobody but him. I say it was a serendipitous moment. You know what serendipity means? It's a fortunate accident. My husband hates that word, but he's like so easy. But serendipity, it's a fortunate accident. I don't believe in fortune, but I love the word, and it's just something that I thought was so. It was horrible, but it was horrible. But when I was walking through it, I really felt I didn't see any way that there could be a positive. There is no way a year ago that I thought that there could be a positive from what I was feeling when I was in my car crying, asking God what's going on with me. That was just a year ago, a little over a year ago. And to be able to truly sit before you right now and feel like I know God is working in my life and I'm so excited for what he's doing. I don't know his plan, but I'm so excited for it. And that I feel lighter. I feel freer, you know? That is nothing but God. And he saw it for me, it seemed like an accident. I feel like I stumbled into this moment, that I stumbled into writing a book from a testimony. But God knew it was my plan all along. I just had to go through the toughness to get to the other side. And for that, I'm just so grateful. And I hope that somebody who's listening, if it's just one person, I'm praying that God would touch on their heart and that he would do the same thing for them that he did for me, where he takes their heartache, their brokenness, and brings his healing, and it collides. No skid marks, just bam, and just brings plant such a seed in their life that it makes them they can't sleep. They can't sleep because they yearn for Christ to do something more in their lives, and that He will through that work, because it is work, but through that work they'll find their purpose, like I believe I'm finding mine.
Before we go, again, where can they find your book? Where can they find any of your social media? And
Yeah.
before we and the ones that are listening and viewing, what kind of words of encouragement can you give them to after going to depression, anxiety? You know,
Yeah.
if they used, what kind of words before can you give them to step out of it and go seek the help? You know, faith based, Christian based, or if it just to get the help to step out of the rut and change their life for the better.
Yes, I'll try to stay untapped. So first is my book is called The Prescription is in the Third, and it is on Amazon. You can get it an ebook if you like to read digitally. You can totally get it like that, or you can get a paperback sent to you. I think they'll send it to you in no less than 3 days. You can get it before Christmas. It'll be a great stocking stuffer. It'll be a great whoever you buy it for, they'll thank you. But it's called The Prescription is in the Dirt. I'm on Facebook, the Fatima Oliver. You can look me up. Instagram, the same Fatima Oliver. I believe it's Fatima Oliver 1975. Even on LinkedIn, Fatima Oliver. And Reddit. I'm on there too. So you can definitely look me up. I don't have um aliases. It's Fatima Oliver. As far as anybody who was like me, who was like if black people don't go to therapy or we don't do that, or we don't talk about our problems, what happens in our home stays in our home. If you were raised that way, old school way, this happens in our home, it stays in our home. um Everybody needs a safe place to fall. And that is always something that I've craved and I've looked for it in the wrong places. But everybody needs a safe place to fall. If there is for no other reason, somebody, I think paying somebody if I have to have a safe place to fall, then it's worth it to be able to go and talk to somebody who's totally impartial. They don't know me, they don't know my story, they don't know my people, and to be able to just listen to me and allow me to speak and uninterrupted and get some things off my heart. It's worth it. And a lot of times, your insurance at your job will help you to get free assistance. But also, if you don't have that and you're like, but I would like to get involved somehow, or at least get in a setting, a healing setting, Celebrate Recovery. You can find that. You can Google that, and there are places around town, and I think in our country, all over, where you can just Google Celebrate Recovery, and you'll find so many different locations around, and it's free. For me, it was like free therapy, even though it's not therapy, but it's like free therapy, and they will pray for you. And you will get an accountability partner, and you may even get a sponsor, and you will get somebody who gives you that tough encouragement, but also somebody that will bear your infirmities. So either which way you go, the point here is that you go. Um, Sometimes you can't tell your family those painful things. Sometimes you need somebody to help you to work on that conversation of how to have that conversation with family members or close friends or even your husband or whoever. Therapy is a good place to start. They'll help you to be able to focus on the intention of your conversation and not so much attacking. And finally, it's a good way to approach healing. If you don't know the first place to start, I really would encourage you to start somewhere, start there. Mental health is a serious thing. For me, I always said, James, that I wanted God to tap me on my head with anointing oil, folks to pray over me, and I fall down and all of that, and then I come up just healed. Like I was really waiting on that. I was doing intercessory prayer. I'm like, I need that to happen, but it didn't happen that way. And one day I was crying and I was thinking, I want to drive through that intersection. I'm just going to drive right through it. And I caught myself and I said, God, help me. I need help. And it hit me in my head. Told you I have a thick head. It hit me in my head and he said, go to the dang doctor. And it hit for the first time that God uses his people. He gives us all skills for a reason. We have construction workers. That's who builds buildings. So why can't a doctor be the help you need to get you medically treated if you have clinical depression? And I had to humble myself and take that first step. So all I'm saying is that there is help available. And I really pray that you will hear the earnestness in my voice and understand that I've been there and I've done it. And I've definitely had people tell me, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. but there was something wrong with me and I needed the help. And if you need the help, be brave and go get it.
Wow. I want to thank you, Fatima, for your
You're
time.
welcome.
Again, for the ones watching, listening, go ahead and check out her book, The Prescriptions in the Soil. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit her From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told and voices need to be heard.
Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things become new.
Y'all be blessed. Till we see you again. Yeah, yeah.